Hi everyone, welcome to Frankenstein's Fabrics June Mystery Block 12. This month we've gone for a heart block. So with the fabrics that I've chosen, I've gone for my brights in my darkest colour. So I just wanted a high contrast on this one, but you can use a print or a plain. It doesn't matter. Just have a think about what your layout is going to look like and how it coordinates with the rest of the blocks that you've made so far. So if you have any questions about the instructions or any queries about the other blocks, please feel free to let me know in the comments or let me know via text, email or phone call. Now, one of the things I always wanted to bring up with this video is that over the next 2.5 years, and I know that's a long time to think ahead, but I'm actually going back to study, so things will be a little condensed for time, but I'm going to keep doing videos like this and things and other things like this, but I just wanted to let you all know that I am back at study. I am studying reptile zoology. So that's exciting, and it will change a few things in terms of scheduling and timing and stuff like that. So if you do ring me or email me and I don't get back to you straight away, or I don't answer the call, it might be that I'm in the middle of an assignment or something like that. So we'll just see how we go in the first stages and we'll play it by ear. So I'm doing 3 courses, one online this year and then TAFE over the next couple of years. So we'll see how we go. There'll be some teething problems as we work out the schedule, but it will all work out in the end, and I'm still quilting and I'm still sewing and I'm still doing all the things I'm doing. I'm just taking this on as an extra thing because I've always wanted to work with animals, particularly reptiles, snakes and lizards. So we'll get into sewing today with our heart block. Okay, so here we have the 2 fabrics that I've chosen for today, and I'm going with my really highly saturated color, so my brightest orange, brightest and darkest of my pinks. Now what you want to do is you want to decide which fabric is going to go for each piece, so the heart and the background. So I decided in this case that I would like my heart to be orange and my background to be pink. So I'm going to cut the orange first, and as we've done before, straighten up your edge, and that I've folded mine in 4 because I'm working on a smaller mat today, a smaller space with the camera, sorry. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to cut a rectangle of this fabric, and that's going to be the body of the heart. So what I want to do is I'm going to cut 2 to make 1 heart. Now if you want to make more hearts, you need to cut these in pairs. So I'm going to cut 2 of the rectangles, but I only need to cut 1 because this is width of fabric. So what I'm going to do, because I'm right-handed, remember, so keep in mind your right and left hand, I'm going to cut the width of my ruler, which is 6.5 inches. I'm going to line it up on a fold and check my straight edge, and then I'm going to cut. Put aside the rest of the fabric. And then I'm going to take my selvages off here. Now I'm taking a little bit more off because there are some holes from the manufacturing there that I'm not happy with, and so then I would like to cut a 12.5 inch strip. Now I'm going to use the mat to do this, so it'll go off camera for a second here. So line up, find your 12.5 inch marking, and cut. So I now have 2 rectangles of the size I want. Pop everything else aside for the moment, including the rectangles you've just cut, and we're going to cut our pink. Now, this is a piece of pink that I've been using for a few different projects, so I've got sections cut out of it, it's bits and pieces. But I only need some small pieces for this here. So what I'm going to do is I just need to cut some small pieces. So what I'm going to do is just go through those with you, and you can cut them at any position you want from here. If you're using scraps, if you're using leftovers, just find the right size leftover that matches the measurement that we're doing. Okay, so the pieces that I need for this section are only small. It's 2 6.5-inch squares and 4 2.5-inch squares. So I'm just going to grab my 6.5-inch square here, and I'm just going to see what I can get out of where I've got my chunks out of this fabric. So I can probably get most of it out of this piece in the corner here. So what I'm going to do first is I'll just maneuver this into sight for you. I'm going to cut 1 6.5-inch square because it's my biggest piece. Now if you've got a rotating cutting mat, this would be much easier for you. I don't mind cutting in odd angles, so I can do that without too much worry. And I'm just trimming off this frayed edge here. So I need one of these and another one, and I'm just going to move along here because I think I can get all of my bits out of here, but I don't want to go up into this section here. So I'm going to line it up again because I now know that that is a straight edge there. Okay, so they're my 2 squares, and now I want my 2.5-inch squares. So now I need 4 of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to straighten up this edge here, and I'm going to turn my fabric and pop the bulk away from me. I'm going to find the 2.5-inch mark on my ruler, and I'm going to just cut, and then I'm actually going to move this up so that I can cut a few at a time. So, and then I want 2.5, and I need 4 of these. So as I was saying before, if you're using a scrap of fabric like I am here, just make sure that you've got some straight edges that you can do your measurements with. If you have odd pieces or little scraps in a tub somewhere, just check those measurements and make sure that you can get the size out of it that you want. Okay, so pop away your excess fabric. We don't need our cutting implements for the moment, so we can pop them aside. So what we want to do now is on the back of all of our squares, we want to draw a diagonal line. So grab a marking pen or a pencil, whatever your preference is. I generally go for a pen or something dark like a lead pencil, but it depends on the colour of the fabric. You will need a longer ruler for this to reach across the span of your squares, so don't use your 6.5-inch one because it won't reach across these squares here. So just find the diagonal point to point and use your pen. Now that pen you can see on screen, this is a Clover blue pen. They are water soluble, so they come out with a bit of water in the wash, but because we're drawing on the back it doesn't matter so much. I don't worry about removing markings if they're on the wrong side. So do the same onto your small squares. Okay. Don't forget to put the lid on your pen so it doesn't dry out, because they do not last if you don't keep them capped. Okay, so now what we want to do with these diagonals that we have done is they're going to be rotated, sorry, in a certain position. I'll put it this way so this is going to be our heart. So what we want to do is one of these has to be at the bottom and two of these have to be at the top. Now, because of the way we want our heart to go, now because I've got my diagonal going here, I need to have one of these on the inside that follows this one and one on the outside that follows the other. So they're opposites, and this one, these two go in the same direction, this one's the opposite. So then on our other rectangle, you need to do the opposite. So okay, so we now have our matching ones. So the internal square matches the big square and the external one is opposite. So then what I need you to do is these lines need to be stitched. Now if you remember back to when we did the snowball block, we talked about the preemptory things you can do to create other patchwork pieces so that you don't have to do them later. So this is the same thing again as what we did there. So if you come out and you draw a line a 1/2 inch away from this line, so we get our marking pen again, I'll show you what that looks like. So if you draw, now it has to be on the bottom edge, so away from the line here. So just line up your 1/2 inch mark and draw. So you can do that to all of them. Now if you don't want to do this particular step because you're not worried about scraps and bits and pieces, by all means just forget this bit here. It just means that later on you'll have a block that you can use for something else. So you can do it with the smaller ones as well, but these will be very tiny. So totally up to you if you want to do these ones. Not a problem if you don't. I'm going to do them just because I'll show you actually how tiny they end up. So 1/2 inch away. Make sure your 1/2 inch marking is right on that line and draw. So basically when we go over to the sewing machine, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be stitching on these lines that I've drawn. So you can see, if you do just a little bit of prep work here and there, you can catch up with some other bits and pieces. Okay, so we're now ready to go over to the sewing machine. So I will rework the camera spot and I will see you in a second. Okay, so here we are at the machine. I've just popped a pin in each of the small squares so that I don't lose them, because I want to make sure I've got my orientation right for both of those. So what I'm going to do is I've got everything set up the same as normal, my universal 80 needle white thread, so you can see on screen. I'm not pinning this big square because it'll be attached in a second, and I'm just going to line up my needle with that line and stitch. Now you can't really do chain piecing too much with this because you're just doing one run. If you're going to do lots of blocks, of course you can keep going, but that's up to you. Also, you don't necessarily need a 1/4 inch foot doing this. If you're more confident with having one on, by all means, but we don't really, you just need whatever foot will allow you to do a straight stitch and has enough visibility for the lines that you're working with. So just take that pin out that's holding that square in place and re-square everything up and do this 2 small short runs. Now, once we've done one, do the other, and then we'll go to the next step. Okay, so trim your threads, repeat for the other blocks, pieces, and we'll come back for the next step. Okay, so here we have our 2 pieces ready to trim, and you can sort of see where we're going here with this heart shape. So you can use a rotary cutter for this step, but if you feel fine just eyeballing it, just cut straight down the middle. And repeat for all sections. Make sure your scissors are sharp so you don't muck around on your fabric. Okay, so now we have our heart. You can see how this is coming together here. So what we want to do now is we want to flip all of these out and press the seams to the darker side, so to the dark pink in this case. So just get my iron going again. There we go. Sorry about the smoke effects there. So if you press it to the darker side and then go from the front and just make sure you don't have any rolls in that seam. You do not want your seam to be rolled over. And I apologise for the noise in the background. Nimbus is trying to get into the craft room. So do the same with your triangles at the top. Flip over and check. And we repeat for the other side. Now, if you were to make this block with a frame, you could do that, but you would have to adjust your sizing. So now, we've got our 2 heart halves, and we just pop them together. So, flip one over to the other side. Now, because we've got 2 seams here that are going to be angled, you want to match them up carefully, and this is where I will use pins. Now, if you want to, you can flip one of these seams to the other side if you find that easier. So, all you need to do is just reset that seam in the opposite direction, and that will butt those seams up together. And just pop a pin and go a bit diagonally when you put these pins in, because you're trying to hold together a diagonal. And pop a pin up the top as well, even though we're going to be sewing down this side. Pop a pin there. Now the same problem again with the bottom. If you want to, this is not a hard and fast rule that I'm going to say you have to stick to. If you want to, you can. Otherwise, if you're happy to open the seams, that's personal preference as well. In a case where I've got a fabric that's significantly darker than the other one, and I don't want to press the seam to the lighter fabric, you can do a thing that's called grading the seam. So what happens here is, I'm going to flip this one over. So I'm resetting that seam. Now, if I flip this over and I feel like I can see the shadow of that seam, the pink coming through, what I can come along and do is I can get my scissors and very gently and very cautiously cut what could be seen over and above the orange. So you can see here, you're just skimming a tiny amount of that seam allowance out of the way. Now, I don't really have to worry because the orange is quite dark in this instance. But what happens is that the pink will sit behind the orange, and the orange is what is seen. So if the pink was sticking out a fraction here, you'd be able to see it. But I'm not too worried because, as I said, the orange is dark enough. I'm going to abut those seams. I just have to repress this a bit. So I want to get those seams in. I'm just going to pop a pin on the diagonal here. So what I'm doing with my thumb there is I'm actually feeling the seams sort of touching underneath. And now I'm just going to do a seam down this side, 1/4 inch, and we are done. Okay, so just with these little pieces here that we had left over, just press the seam to your darker fabric and pop them aside for a later project. As you can see, these little ones are quite tiny, so you may not have a use for them at that size. They're about 1 inch and a bit, so just do keep them aside, but don't worry if you can't use them. So all the seams to the dark side and pop them aside in some storage. Okay, so back at the machine, I'm lining up everything. I've got my scant 1/4 inch. Now I'm just stitching slowly here because that seam underneath is flipped the other way and I don't want it to flip back. And when I get down the bottom here, realign if you have to. Just make sure that that seam underneath doesn't flip. Take your pins out. And there we have our heart block. Okay, so just press your seam down the center, make sure you haven't got any rolls, and you've got your block. Now, if you do find that you've lost anything in the seam allowance, now I have, I think it's the new starch I've been using, it's shrunk the fabric a fraction. What you can do is cut your block a little bit bigger, so say 7, and what it will do is it will just change the angles slightly, and that way you can trim it back to the 12.5. But I'm not going to worry about it. As I said in the very beginning of all of this, I will show you how to fudge things at the end of when we put everything together, because we will be able to use our sashings to disguise anything that's out of alignment. So this is the heart block. I hope you enjoyed this one. Make sure you pop your label on it and pop it in with the rest of your books. And then we will be back next month with another mystery. And we're getting to the point now where I'm not sure what's left. So we shall see. It truly is a mystery at this stage. So we'll see what we've got next time. Make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you get reminders when these videos are posted. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below, or you can contact me on my phone number or my email address, also detailed below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.